This past weekend, we had another playtest in Squad. This was meant to feature the Sanctioned Island map and the Turkish land forces faction in a little more detail. So let's take a look at this, but be sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a like, drop a comment down below with your thoughts, and let's get to it. First, we're going to jump over to the training range, where my friend Mehdi pointed something out to me, and it was kind of odd that this was somehow included but not mentioned. If you take a close look at the difference between the playtest version that we had this past weekend and current live version of Squad, there seems to be some minor adjustments to some of the mechanics around ADSing and crouching. Having the opportunity to actually handle this in the training range, I noticed first that there was no head bob when crouching. Additionally, compared to ADSing in the live version of Squad, something felt different. It felt like a smoother experience. There's a little bit of a wiggle as the scope comes up to your eye, which seems to be a much smoother presentation in the playtest. Now, I'm not really sure if this is something that is meant to come to the live version of Squad or if this is just something happening in this playtest. Is this an update to ICO and the mechanics or not? So yeah, this is something I've talked about before in some of the early playtests. It's something I didn't want. I even left feedback about it. If it's something that is indeed an update to ICO, I'm for it, in my opinion. I know some folks would disagree with that. I would like to see this change because A, it just feels like the crouching head bob was just a little bit clunky. It made you feel almost heavy, and the ADS wiggle was often frustrating, especially when trying to aim rather quickly. Now, I understand some of those mechanics are there to slow you down, but that one just felt like more of a call out to a mechanic versus something that felt organic. And I don't remember a public playtest with these features sort of missing. So again, I don't know what this is, if it's something to kind of lean on as something we can see, or if it's just sort of a mistake or maybe a different build. Now, as expected, the Turkish land forces are added to the Jensen's training range in the Squad playtest. I didn't notice anything crazy different, though it does look like they are starting to get this closer to implementation. Now, obviously, if you watched our last video on the previous playtest that leaked this faction, you probably have a pretty good idea of what to expect, but there was one new addition to this playtest, and that was the light vehicle that the Turkey land forces will be operating in the Cobra, which looks like a menacing, fun vehicle just to operate. And it gives you the option of the Browning or the MG3 in remote and open top variations. Let's take a quick look at some of the weapons on the firing range. Here's one of the weapons across many of the kits, being the MPT-76. I feel like this weapon is going to be pretty comfortable to use, in a sense of like it being easy to pick up and utilize, especially with ICO. And you're going to find this weapon across most of the kits in the Turkey land forces, either with an iron sight, with a holographic, or the scope. And frankly, I don't think there's any big surprises between the holographic version or the iron sight version of this weapon. I do love the detail in having the magazine that has some transparency to it. I think that's very neat. But as I mentioned, I think this weapon is going to be pretty easy to pick up across the board, unlike some other weapons in Squad. For example, not everyone loves the PLA set of weapons or the MEA set of weapons because they seem to have a little bit steeper learning curve. The SAR 109T is going to be attached to certain roles and kits, including crewmen. As one would expect, you have a pretty limited range and you're going to have to use this thing on some burst fire because it is jumpy. Next up, we have the machine gunner's PMT-76. And the machine gunner MG3 with no sight. And as always, the sound of that thing is so impressive. We also have the Marksman KNT-76 with a 6x scope. And most importantly, like we talked about in our last video, we have this grenade launcher that has smoke grenades and high explosives. You are going to have a time with this. It takes a while to reload and there's a whole reload animation for it, but man, is it fun. So next, we were supposed to be playing the Sanctioned Islands in the playtest. However, admittedly, I didn't really have much of an opportunity to play. I looked on Saturday and there were only 2 servers that I saw on the browser, one of which wasn't even halfway full that I can remember. The other one was almost empty. And then on Sunday, there was only 1 server that I found present and it was basically empty. So I really didn't get the combat side of it. I've already taken a look at the map. I've played it in one of the other playtests, so I have some idea of what to expect. I do think this map is going to present some interesting challenges. It has waterways running in between it, breaking up some of the land continuity. It's also got a lot of different vegetation on there, providing a decent amount of coverage. And in playing one of the layers that had more of a sunset earlier on in one of the other playtests, I noticed it was really tough sometimes to get great visibility on who was shooting at you, especially with ICO present. In addition to a lot of vegetation, there's a bunch of different height changes and angles, along with these little villages and points of interest that you're going to have to deal with. Obviously, with any map, mobility is key, but I do feel like this map in particular is going to offer some challenges of getting your troops from place to place. Part of it is the points of interest, because I do think you're going to have a lot of folks that want to sit in some of these points of interest and hold position, or have difficulty getting out very quickly. This is by no means some new revelation. Instead, it's more of understanding how sometimes groups can get caught up in certain areas. You can end up with those stalemates on different points of interest with difficulty of progressing your troops forward. And with all the vegetation, I see opportunities here for people that are attacking, or maybe just trying to hold a group in place, sitting in the woods and really laying down a lot of cover fire to make it very difficult for forces to move off of a point or POI. Additionally, I think the verticality on the map also provides a lot of different options for vehicles and some cover in many ways. It's hard to illustrate everything, but I do think this map offers its own unique challenges to the player. So let's talk about some overall impressions. I'm excited to see the Sanctioned Islands added to Squad. This is something very different from the maps that we have. It's sort of unique in its own way. It reminds me of my old Battlefield days playing something like Wake Island. I think OWI has done a very good job of making the map and the terrain and everything feel very immersive, especially the vegetation. So I'm really excited to dive into this and see how combat plays out. I think with all these amphibious factions now, it's going to be really interesting to see how those are utilized in an island setting. The Turkish land forces feel like they're getting pretty close to release. Like, I feel like maybe Turkey could be released before the end of the year. I'm not sure what else needs to go into the Sanctioned Islands. Maybe that's something to be paired with Turkey so that we get both things in one package. But nonetheless, I'm pretty excited to see this faction added because it's something different than I expected. And that makes it a little bit more exciting as it's something just vastly new. I was expecting Germany or France, like I mentioned in the last video, so this is a little bit of a different direction. But I am happy that we get another Blue 4 aligned faction to play with. Something else in that rotation is very welcomed. Now, the first thing we discussed were some of the mechanic changes to aiming and to crouching. I don't know if these are things that are going to be implemented into Squad, so I don't want to get into this position of hyping up something that was just maybe a mistake or left out of the build. Although it just does seem kind of odd that it's not there, considering every public playtest that I had played, I don't remember these things not existing to some degree. But I'd love to hear what you think. Obviously the changes are subtle, but they are there. Do you think this is something that should be removed from Squad, or do you think this is just perhaps something that's missing from this build? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Catch you next time.